What's your I finally met my online friend horror story? I used to play World of Warcraft with my now ex. Our guild leader actually wound up moving to our state with his wife. My ex and I broke up before we got the chance to hang out with the guy, and right after the breakup he messaged my ex essentially asking if it was cool if he and his wife got me drunk and took advantage of me. Ex showed me screenshots when I was getting my stuff from his place and I cancelled my plans to meet the guy and his wife. My ex had been physically abusive and broke up with me to date the girl he cheated on me with. I tried leaving before, but he'd fake suicide attempts and I was so scared he'd go through with it, so I stayed. Even though he was in a new relationship he tried to keep tabs on me and control me, but I saw it as my chance to escape. I happened to move right after we split and he didn't know my new address. I blocked him on everything. Somehow he kept getting information on me though. Turns out the guild leader was feeding him everything. I hadn't deleted the guy off Facebook cause I figured he was only a problem in person. When I confronted him over Messenger, bringing up the abuse, and the guy said he choked you because you guys were arguing and he was afraid he wouldn't get the chance to speak. He still loves you. Side note, the choking was cause I was defending myself against accusations of cheating, which I hadn't done. After college ended I was playing a game called EVE Online. I was in a corporation with a dude who I thought was the coolest. He had sold Swift in game for real world money and had built a supercomputer. He had a smoking hot girlfriend and had pictures of them rock climbing doing some super cool Swift. He was also like a head chef where he worked, and since I was a chef as well, I had a little bit of a bromo crush on him. He told me after I graduated that he could hook me up with a manager job and all I had to do was move up there. I sold everything I owned that day at a pawn shop and bought a U-Haul and started driving. 1 hour before I got there, it was like a week-long drive. He called me and told me the job was no longer available and I shouldn't come. When he found out how close I was he said to just come anyways. When I got there I was completely blown away. They lived in a disgusting section 8 apartment with 4 other people in a 1-bedroom apartment. They had like 3 cats, which I'm allergic to, and a kid as well. Day 1 it was all drugs and partying. I did not partake. I was not enthused. Day 2 I went into the city looking for a Swift job to survive. I got one. It was Swift. Day 3 my buddy tells me we're all moving out and into a nice apartment. Week 3 we actually move into a new apartment, and the first night in that apartment he starts beating his smoking hot girl in front of their kid. The second time he beat her, I called the cops him, and his girl immediately said I was a bad guy and that they were just loving each other. They had the cops escort me from the apartment. So there I was, 1700 miles away from home, homeless at 2 AM, and it's freaking raining on all my Swift. Lars, you are a sack of SHWIFT, and I hope you die of space herpes. It's not a horror story, it's a story about how I was put off meeting people from the internet. I was friends with a bunch of people I met through an online game. After about 2 years, I decided to meet 2 of them. The 2 I was meeting were a long distance couple, one from one country and the other from mine. They had met many times and had spent 2 weeks together prior to meeting with me. We met in the city, said hi and hugged, and did some touristy stuff, took their pictures etc etc. But throughout the whole time, they weren't really talking to me. At first, I put it down to anxiety as I was nervous too. But even after lunch, they were only talking to each other, and I felt left out. I even took a sneaky video of them talking to each other and sent it a friend, who agreed it was odd. When it was time for me to leave, I told them I had to go, but I had a nice time, and they continued to chat to each other. I said it again but no response, so I started to walk away until one of them said oh bye. I was really hurt. It was like they didn't want me to be with them. I had spent a lot of money getting down, especially since at the time I didn't have a job. When I got back, I stopped talking to them. The friend who I sent the video to sent a message to them asking why they were ignoring me, and they tried to turn it on me saying that I was the quiet one and that I was being rude to them, especially leaving without saying goodbye. I blocked them all on the game. A few months go by, and one of them finds my social media and tries to reconnect. Starts off well, and then goes back to blaming me. Haven't met anyone from the internet since. Had an online friend for well over a decade. She lived around Atlanta and I went down there to visit my aunt and cousin. Turns cousin was out of town and my aunt was too old to go around sightseeing. Hit up online friend and she and her boyfriend weren't far from me, so we met up. They were homeless and couch surfing at the time, so I paid for everything. Didn't really care, I had vacation money to burn. The trip was fine, no real issues. When I got home things started going sour. They got kicked out of the friend's place, so the boyfriend asked me multiple times for money to get back on their feet. I sympathized but I spent all my spare cash on vacation, so I declined. Eventually they broke up and she moved in with family. She claimed he was abusive, which I never saw signs of, but he did tell her some ridiculous things. He said he had to get dick reduction surgery cause it was too big. Other equally ridiculous things about his military career made me realize that my friend was pretty naive about how the world works. She never held a job, no higher education, which I don't judge as a tradesman, never really had any sort of financial responsibility as she was entirely dependent on family or boyfriends. Basically in a state of arrested development. So one day she texts me saying she wants kids, but doesn't want another man in her life. So she asks if I will donate my sperm to her. I'd have no obligation to the children whatsoever, just be a donor. I agreed if she could prove she was financially stable first. She flipped the fuck out, said I was just another man trying to control her. I was raised by a single parent, so I know how hard it is, and I don't want a child to go through that with a parent who can't provide. She got more angry, and I got fed up and told her off. We haven't spoken since. A 15-year-ish friendship died that day. Sorry if this is rambling, I'm on mobile and don't make large posts often. TL. Dr. Irresponsible friend wants me to be a sperm donor. I refuse until she gets her life together. I called the guy on the phone a few times. Knew him for about 12 years. Turns out he's an asshole, and so am I, probably. I like this story. Seems like a good ending. Needs Hemingway-esque dialogue. And lose my phone number, he said. Throw away my phone just in case. Good, we are both assholes. And not in the soulmates kind of way either. That's the only reason it's good. He and I were part of the same forum many years ago. He was dealing with his issues, and I was dealing with mine. I think we both went there to escape, where people wouldn't judge. Also, because we were bored. I'm not quite sure when we got properly talking. I think it's when he told a terrible joke about kipper ties. We used to share everything with each other over MSN. I'd give him advice about his love life and he'd listen to all my fuck ups. It took quite a few fuck ups before we eventually met up. I think I already knew we were in love, but seeing him in person really cemented it. We decided to give it a go, even though we lived 300 miles away from each other. We had a lot of ups and downs. I was distant. He lived with his ex-girlfriend for a bit, even though she didn't have a job and couldn't afford her half of the rent. The same ex-GF who I'd given him advice on, who he had nicknamed Trouble, and liked to claim she was pregnant every so often. We got over that, along with many other things, and finally moved in with each other. I thought our issues were gonna be solved when there was no distance between us. Ends up, we were just very different people who wanted very different things, and the distance wasn't gonna change that. We broke up after 3.5 years together. None of that's the horror story. Not the way he treated me, not the fact he probably cheated on me, not that I wasn't a priority and used to cry myself to sleep. About 1.5 years after breaking up, he gets back in touch and we talk like it was in the beginning when we were friends. After a few weeks, he asked if I want to get back together. I said no. I told him that he'd broken my heart again. The next day, I got a phone call from his work because I was still his emergency contact asking me if I knew where he was because he hasn't turned up. The police got in touch too. The last phone call that day was from his mum to let me know that he'd killed himself. A couple of years ago this girl messaged me on Reddit saying she really connected with a comment I made about first seeing the ocean because she had just gone through a similar experience. She was going to come down to Chicago to visit a friend of hers and asked for suggestions of things to do. I gave her a bunch and then we kept talking and finding out we had more and more in common. We eventually started talking over the phone and text messages, and when she came down we went out for burgers and beer. We kept talking every day after that, and I was really starting to like her. She said she wanted to come down to Chicago again, and if she could stay with me. I told her of course, and a few weeks later she was here for Saturday and Sunday. Really it was mostly Sunday, because she got in late on Saturday and fell asleep on my couch. The next day we went to the zoo and had a really amazing day. After that we came back to my place and decided to go to the brewery nearby which made a beer that had her name in it. We went there and then ended up bar hopping through until we ended up near the dive bar by my apartment. We drank and played pool there and eventually grabbed some to-go beers and headed back. I asked if she wanted to see the place by the river I like to go and drink and think. We sat and eventually started making out and decided to head back to my apartment. We hooked up and then the next day went to the south side to get breakfast at a place she really liked near her friend's apartment before she had to drive back. We kept talking after that and I was planning on coming up to visit her in Detroit, but then one day she just ghosted me out of nowhere. Not as horrible as some other stories, but it was really shitty for me because I actually really liked this girl, and to this day I have no idea why she stopped talking to me. Edit, she's definitely not dead. We followed each other on Instagram and I saw that she was okay a bit after she ghosted me. I was on Meet Me, met this guy who was super cool. We ended up texting every single day and I took the train out to Los Angeles to meet him. When I got there, he was being kinda swifty, and he told me that he hadn't gotten much sleep because he was partying until 5 AM. We walked to his house, and when I walked into his room, I was kind of shocked. It was a 8x6.5 room. All he had was a mat on the floor and a small little jewelry box full of mementos on top of his suitcase of clothes. We took a nap together. Later, we went to get ramen and he asked me to pay. I didn't mind. We went back to his place and we listened to music while we waited to go to a party. Fast forward to that night, we met up with some of his friends and they were so mean to him. They kept roasting him and picking on him, and he was visibly getting upset. I stopped him for a bit so his friends could walk ahead of us. I reminded him that it was all fun and games and to ignore them. Ended up at the party and lots of people knew him. I sat out in the patio with a few cool people that I had just met while I waited for my friend to come back from saying hello to everyone inside. He never did. I was outside in the patio with these strangers for about 3 hours. People kept coming up to me and asking if I was alright. IDK if I looked sad or if I just looked like a plain loner. I went to find him and it was so packed. Didn't see him, so I walked back. I seen his roommate and asked him to please tell my friend that I was gonna go get a motel. He went to tell him, came back and said my friend was being a dick and he would walk me back to the house instead, so I didn't have to spend money on a hotel. We got to the house and I thanked him for walking all the way back home. I really appreciated it as my friend was probs inside doing coke or freaking girls. I went to bed in my friend's room and he woke me up in the middle of the night kissing me, trying to get his freak on. I simply said no, I'm not interested in having sex. His exact words were, "Are you serious? What was the point of you coming here? You're such a waste of time." My feelings were really hurt. I went back to sleep, woke up and left. Never wrote him after that. He had texted me a month later asking to borrow $50. I simply ignored the message and moved on. Guy I knew in college met a girl online and spent every day talking about her. She lived about 6 hours away, so he planned to take a semester off and pursue this relationship. He got a job in her town and asked if I'd help him move out there since my car would hold more than he could take on a bus. I had a long weekend off and figured, why not? A road trip could be fun. I'd drive him out as a goodbye present, and the way back I planned to visit Yellowstone. Well, we arrive and it turns out he doesn't have an apartment lined up and he found a job posting in his girlfriend's town. He hadn't actually gotten the job or even applied yet. I make a bunch of phone calls and find him a room to rent that will let him move in that day with just first, last, and deposit, even without a job. I'm tired and disgusted with his lack of planning, but figure it's worth staying the night and trying to end things on good terms with my buddy. Then he breaks down and confesses that he hasn't actually met this girl. The nights he spent video chatting with her were really just him watching her vlog and jacking it. They've never talked, never texted, never even emailed. Hell, he's never even left so much as a comment or like on one of her videos. She genuinely didn't, still doesn't, know he existed. His plan was to hang out at this game shop she talks a lot about until she showed up and somehow create a relationship from that. He thought that they'd meet and she'd fall in love with him and move back to our college town to marry him, all before the next semester began. That didn't happen. Instead, I made my buddy buy a bus ticket for his ride back to school and left. He came back to school and got more cringy, not less. I lost track of him after that. I had a layover in Amsterdam and I met up with a buddy I'd been chatting with on Soulseek for years, electronic music file sharing. He gave me directions to his work. We delivered a huge wheel of cheese to a church in the red light district, then got drunk and high in a bar. 10/10ths most Dutch experience possible in Amsterdam. Only horror show part was how tall Dutch people are and how they speak English. The guy was like 6 feet 7 inches and his voice was high to match and all loopy and sing-songy. Very hard to take seriously as a person. Hahaha, Dutch people have the worst accent really. And I can know cause I'm Dutch. Said he was 14. Turns out he was 38. My parents gave him a stern talking to. Born on a leap year obviously. I met 2 LiveJournal friends. I'll call them Adam and Betty. Adam came from the East Coast. Betty came from the West Coast. They met in the middle and vacationed in my state so all of us could hang out. Betty was fine. Exactly the same IRL as she was on LiveJournal. Really pretty too. Adam, though. OMFG. The first night we met up, we were going to karaoke. Adam and Betty would drive to my house, meet my mom, and pick Twin and I up to go to the karaoke bar. Betty doesn't drink, so she'd drive the rental car. They knocked. I opened the door. Missy, my elderly terrier mutt who I love so much, immediately made friends with Betty. Betty walked all the way in, backing Missy up, and then Adam walked in. It was like a switch had flipped. Miss Dog lost her shrift. She did the I'm going to kill you bark, hackles raised, tail tucked between legs, snarling, snapping, and it sounded like she was screaming. Mom asked me to help get the dog under control and in the back room, so I did. Mom said she was worried about this guy Adam and wanted me to be careful. I said Missy was obviously freaked out about him too, so I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him. So, we went to the karaoke bar. Betty ordered pop. This was a non-issue as she was a devout Mormon and didn't drink. I ordered pop, and Adam immediately started trying to talk me into alcohol because he knows I drink. Hard nope, dude. Being young and naive, I said maybe later, rather than trying to pressure people to drink, is a dick move, and it makes people think you're a creep. Twin, who was still presenting female at the time, ordered pop. This surprised me because he was going through a huge party phase. He spent most of his free time drunk. Adam started trying to talk Twin into alcohol too. No, I have a headache. Beer will make it worse. We did karaoke. It was unremarkable. We went home. The next day, Betty flew home. She just changed her ticket and bounced. She gave us the details in a filtered LiveJournal entry, saying that Adam wouldn't stop hitting on her, and she didn't feel comfortable being in the same hotel as him. We all blocked him. I have 2. One was this guy from an MMO I played. He was older than me, married, had a kid, stuck up for me a lot. Everyone said not to trust him, but I thought I knew him better than that. He told me he thought I was really smart, and he wanted to make a journal with me. Because a journal needs a lot of content, though, he asked me to write extra stuff to save for future publications. I had nothing going on, so I said I'd do it, even though his prompts were super specific and kind of boring. One day, though, he called me and asked me to go into his email because he didn't get online and he needed something. I saw a folder with my name on it, so I clicked it. It was filled with emails to other people, with my writing attached, and negotiations for payment. He was selling my writing to college kids for $500 to $1,000 each. The second guy I met from the same game. He was in a bad place, and I felt sorry for him. I offered to let him join me and my new roommate in our apartment search. The rent was going to be super cheap. He was really messy, though, filthy, even, and I told him that, since the landlord was really strict, he'd have to make sure to keep things somewhat clean. He went to my roommate behind my back, said I was too controlling, and offered to replace me with his way cooler friend, who would pay more, of course. I just considered this a bullet dodged and moved on. I got an even better, somehow cheaper apartment. When he saw the photos online, he freaked out, started stalking my mom, sending me notes on where she was throughout the day, and when I called the cops on him, he called in a bomb threat to my work. I lost my job and my apartment. Don't worry, I'm not dumb anymore. I had a guy profess his love for me over Skype. He wanted to come see me. He lived in the UK. I live in the States. Except I had a boyfriend at the time. I told him this. I told him that he was wasting his time and I had zero interest in him. He still is coming. I told him that there was no time to see him as I had work and school. He says it's fine. He will wait until I have time to see him. I told him not to come. He says he has his parents' blessings. So he came. He stayed in a hotel for 3 weeks while I had to deal with finals, work and spending time with my boyfriend. I hung out with him twice, once with a group of friends, and once with my boyfriend. He got mad because he said that he wanted to hang out with me, alone, in his hotel room, and when I said no, he flipped. He said that, because he flew over here, I should at least hang out with him. He flew back home to the UK a few days later, and blocked me on all social media. TL, Dr. Dude travels from the UK to profess his love for me. Is upset that I didn't change my mind. After 4+ years of playing WoW together and chatting, online and on the phone, he invited me to visit him in Australia. I figured it was safe, since I'd known him for quite a while, and had never gotten any weird vibes, no flirtation, no creepiness, nothing. 2 days into my very clearly stated platonic visit, he tried to rape me. I ditched all of my stuff, except what I had in a small duffel bag and took off, traveling on my own for the 2 weeks until my flight home. A few months later, I received an unsigned postcard from the Gold Coast that just said, "Thinking of you," with a smiley face. I never met them, but I did call them. This happened a while ago, so I don't remember it. I was friends with someone, and he wanted to call me, so I got Skype and called him. He was probably in his late 20s. He asked if we could talk every day and if we could meet up. I don't know where he lived. I said I had to go, and he says why. We just started talking. I deleted the game and Skype and never used them after that. Not that scary, but scary for a child. Met a girl online once. Can't remember where, but this was 15 to 20 years ago. We chatted for a while and seemed to hit it off. Eventually she invited me to her house. Turns out she was having a party with about 30 people. She pretty much ignored the whole time I was there, hung out with some cool people, and played some Mario Kart. Left when everyone else started to. Never spoke to her again. I have a lot of online communities I'm involved in, between some forums I'm active in and FFXI. I wasn't there for it, but a bunch of my FFXI friends got together one weekend 10 to 15 years ago. One of them got drunk off his ass, trashed some stuff, and made everyone else miserable. He never got invited again. The most prominent one was where I got cock-blocked by 9/11. I had a trip cross country lined up for a car show and meet up with a bunch of people from a forum I was on. I had been talking to a girl out there for months beforehand, and it had gotten pretty hot and heavy. So I planned to go out for the show, then hang out with her for a week or so after. I also had some work to do out there, but it was mostly to hang out with her. 9/11 happened the Tuesday before the trip. I ended up on one of the first flights out of town that Thursday. 90% of the group cancelled their trips though. When I landed, she sent someone else to pick me up, and she was nowhere to be found. I saw her at the show for about 5 minutes, but besides that she ghosted me. I heard from her after a few days. Her ex and her had gotten back together after 9/11 happened. Because life is short, let's try it again, etc. I spent most of the trip in my hotel room watching the first X-Men movie on HBO. It was a surreal experience all around. They're not all horror stories though. Through the same group I made friends with another girl out of state. We hung out a few times, but figured out we click better as friends. I met her best friend on one of my trips and we started talking online constantly. She flew down one weekend to see how we'd get along in person. We've been married 14 years just about, so I guess it worked out. I met a guy online, we really got on, and he came over a few times so we could hang out. I did find him attractive and tried to hint that I was into him. Note, I can't flirt to save my life, but nothing ever happened. After a few dates he suddenly vanished offline. No social media, he wasn't answering texts or emails, nothing. I thought he'd ghosted me. After 6 months he reappears. I asked him where he'd been, and he said I don't want to talk about it. A few weeks after, there was a fad where people were googling their names and posting humorous stories they had found about similar people with their name. Mine was about a ship that had my initials, and I started to Google friends' names just out of boredom/morbid curiosity. Googled his name and found a local news story from his area. One of those crime and courts things that he had been done for statutory rape of a minor, online grooming, and had his computer and phone seized as evidence. You dodged a big bullet. This is way back in the mid-90s. Bulletin board systems were all the rage. I made friends with this guy from NC. He was friends with a bunch of us from my dorm, mostly females, which should probably have been a red flag, but I was extremely naive at the time. A couple months in, he mentioned he was coming to our state for a wedding and asked if he could come by our college to meet everyone. It was agreed he'd sleep in my dorm room, since my roommate was almost never around. Now, there was no discussion or thought of intercourse, but I was pretty excited to meet this guy and see if he was as funny and charming as he was online. Well, day arrives, dude shows up. I should mention that I and all my college friends were 18 or 19. This guy was 24. Or so he said. Guy looked like, and I'm not exaggerating, a cancer patient. Pale gaunt features, long greasy pale blonde hair, except where he was bald on top, and just generally looked like he was about to die, or he was dressed as a gal for Halloween. He insisted on hugging all of us. I was trying to remind myself that looks don't matter, and that he was a cool guy despite his very unsettling appearance. But then, when we all started hanging out, things just got worse. He was asking really invasive questions of all of us, making weird comments to whatever was said, just all around creepy and distressing. I was sitting on the floor with another friend and actively rocking back and forth from discomfort. I lied and said I had hurt my back, and that sleeping on the floor helped, because that night he kept insisting we could share my tiny twin college bed. Nope. Last time I ever met anyone from that site. I don't know if it's a horror story, but it's how I ended up where I live now. I played WoW 4 years with a pretty regular group, got to know them offline, and at one point two of them, a couple, invited me to move across the country. At the time I didn't have anything tying me to where I was, so I packed up and moved. Got out here, moved in with my friends, and everything seemed okay. My buddy was a long haul driver, so he was always gone for days at a time. His girl would try to set me up multiple times with two of her friends at the same time, one in Minnesota. I ended up having a hard time finding work for a while. Finally got a job though, and was putting some money away while helping watch their kids. Out of nowhere one day my buddy accuses me of trying to fool around with his girl. Nothing had ever happened, but I had noticed her spending more and more time in my room when he wasn't there. I knew his history and his previous relationship had ended after she cheated with a friend of his. He wouldn't listen, so I got kicked out without any warning, and they stole about $1k worth of my stuff and later moved. Ultimately it all worked out for me. Got a good job here, wife, kids, and then cut out the friend and the girl completely. Edit clarified that I cut out the friend and the girl, all not my wife and kids. He was driving cross country with a friend. I said I had a couch/floor they could crash on if needed. He was great. She was an annoying bitch. She hated everything, was annoyed by my cat, didn't like anything I had to eat or drink, etc. They were literally there for like 16 hours. Are you also a woman by chance? Yes. They were not dating. He is gay. I'm not a girl that only has guy friends. Either way, there's definitely women out there who cannot stand other women at all and have to always be fawned over with attention and praise. I know there's guys like that too, and I've met some, but I've met more women who are like that, especially when it comes to male attention, even gay male attention. We were friends online for years. We'd meet up every so often, and when we started families we'd meet up and take the kids to the zoos or whatever. She wanted us to go on a cruise together with our husbands and kids. I made the comment towards the effect of we can't afford that, and she went nuts. We shouldn't have had kids. If we can't afford them, we shouldn't have more children. Our life sucks blah blah blah, because I didn't want to go on a goddamn cruise with her and her bratty ass kid. Sounds like a nightmare. I love how we can't afford a cruise turned into you can't afford your whole life, you irresponsible pleb. Not a horror story, but definitely weird. At 13 years old, I went to a show where my male online friend was also supposed to go. Not a big show, and I was with my father. Don't worry. We were supposed to meet at one of the entrances, but he never showed up. When I asked him about it later, he said he must have been at the wrong entrance. Over time we stopped talking for no reason really. A few years later, one of our mutual online friend told me she learned that the guy in question was actually a girl. I don't care about the gender, the thing is that she wasn't the one on any of the pictures she sent to us and our other friends, and her name wasn't her real name. She totally invented another identity. The worst part is that another of our friend even told us she got pregnant from him. I don't know if she asked her to fake a pregnancy or if it was her own idea, but that was really weird. Wonder what other things she lied to us about. I met a really cool group of people from a chat group website called Zat that lives in minimal distance away from me, like maybe 15 minutes, and the horror story part is that I was in my emo phase and probably made a great lasting impact on their lives as a hot topic connoisseur. Okay guys, don't forget to hit that sub button, also ring that shiny bell, like and share too, and check out other videos in our channel.